Thanks, Tom. Let me just start sharing the screen. Let's see if it goes through. As I said, I have like 500 desktops open, so sorry for that. Presentation mode. Stop me if you guys see that something is wrong with the slides and you can see everything. I think this should go smoothly. And so I think that I wanted to share something with you guys about data scraping, which is a big part of my job and a big part of a lot of data journalist jobs. Scraping, comes from scraper, the tool, and it's a term that in data journalism became popular in the last decade or so to describe this thing that we do to transform websites into structured data. Some might even call it an art form because there's some miracles that some data journalists operate and transform terrible websites into beautiful data sets. But anyway, before we move all into all of that, it's a little bit about me. This is obviously me before the quarantine. So my main Ronaldinho here representing Brazil, where I come from. I came from Boston to New Zealand about 6 or 7 months ago, so don't mind the accent. And I work for Stuff. For those of you who don't know, it's the largest website, news website in New Zealand. I'm a data reporter. I focus on data, visualization, content automation, and a big array of things. Anyway, back to scraping. Scraping is a subset of what data acquisition is, and data acquisition is a very important part of reporting, and it's an even more important part of a data journalist reporting, right? So there are plenty of ways to acquire data. You can file public records requests. You can crowdsource data, but we're gonna focus pretty much on what happens right over here on websites, right? That's where scraping happens traditionally. You can scrape a PDF, but traditionally, when you say data scraping, you're talking about a website. Websites, they are code. They're code that browsers interpret, right? And so Google Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and I mean, may the forces that move this universe forbid you from still being on Internet Explorer. I would sincerely feel for your soul, but websites are a combo of what these three languages are mostly. There are other languages that are also web native, but pretty much the web these days is made of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We're not real CSS. CSS is what makes websites beautiful. But we're really gonna talk about HTML, which is the skeleton, the backbone of what the web is these days, right? So for example, this is a site that I scraped for story. Now let's get into the practical examples. And this is where all the transcripts for parliament sessions in New Zealand are, right? And so you can see this is basically like a table, right? You click on one of those rows, and he sends you to a new page where you will find a transcript of a speech, of a debate, things that happen in Parliament, right? And this is what it looks on your browser. But here's a look at what this page is in, not raw HTML, but HTML. When you look at this, and a lot of people will say, "Well, this is mumbo jumbo. I don't want to deal with this." And well, what they're gonna do is basically they're gonna, do a manual scrape of the website. They want one transcript. They're gonna go there. They're gonna copy and paste. They're gonna put it on Microsoft Word, and there it ends. But what if I wanted to stack 17,000 transcripts, right? That's where the problem started for us. It doesn't scale too well, right? this would be the steps to, get right. You find the link to the transcript, you click on it, you go to the transcript page, you copy and paste dozens of paragraphs into another software, 17,000 times. Just doesn't add up. If we do a little back of that math, I consider that you would take like 2 minutes per transcript, and I bet you would take like more like 5 to 10. We're talking 23 days. We're talking 69 working days when you do absolutely nothing else, like absolutely nothing else. That's 3 or 4 months of your work life gone. And that brings us to the first lesson: hire interns. No, I'm joking. Outsource the boredom of whatever it is that you want to do, right? So you let computers do the heavy lifting. They're way, 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 way better than humans and way less error prone than us at dumb, repetitive tasks. That's the smartest use of a computer these days. That's why computers were invented, to do things that humans couldn't, or that humans were not efficient enough to do, right? And this allowed Charlie Mitchell and I. Charlie Mitchell is a national correspondent at Stuff, focuses on the environment, and it allowed us to, write the story, which is a comprehensive analysis of anything that was ever said in the last 20 to 30 to 40 years. I don't remember exactly the time frame, with any climate change related term in New Zealand Parliament, right? And it only took a little program that I wrote 8 hours to scrape the whole website. So database that amounts, I think, to 7 gigabytes. And, it really saved me a lot of time, 8 hours versus 4 months. I think that was a good move of ours. And I use a little bit of, I listed here a little bit of the technologies that I use. Python, which is the language I wrote a program on. Scrappy, which is a framework that you use within Python, and MongoDB, which is, for people who are familiar with databases, is it's a different type of database. It's not your usual SQL or relational database, but it was pretty ideal for this use case. Anyway, and we were also able to do like this fancy charts over here. And it was a story that really resonated with our audience. So it was pretty cool to see that on the page. And so let's move on to that other part of the website that we didn't talk about just yet, right? JavaScript. JavaScript is, all the flashy things that you see on pages, and, all those things like graphics that look real nice, the animations, all the searchable databases that you see out there. That's all JavaScript these days. 99% of the cases, it's gonna be powered by some form of JavaScript, right? And websites like this, getting into rugby and what Tom really highlighted on the intro. Websites like the Rugby World Cups, they really rely heavily on JavaScript. And you can see that there's data here. Most tries, most points, red cards, drop goals, the scores. But there's there's a lot more. There's a lot more hiding in plain sight, and like you don't even know, and it's so easy to get it, right? You don't even need to know a lot. You just need to know a trick or two, and you can find like nuggets of gold over here. So, for example, if we drill a little bit more on this website, you see some things here that might also, again, sound scary. But when you look at it, it says summary, stats, timeline, schedule, standings. What could this be? Yeah, summary, stats, timeline, schedule, standings. All those data are available and open for us to use. And this is gold. This is, this is how we got some cool stories done. When you follow those things, you see at first, the white part of this GIF, that it's, mumbo jumbo again, a lot of random characters apparently, but with like this simple Google Chrome extension that you just click install, you can basically parse this form of data, which is called JSON. It's just like a CSV. You can parse it into something that like it's really structured and basically understandable if you take a look at it, right? And so that draws me into the second takeaway that I want to offer to you guys. If you want to scrape data, learn a little bit how websites work. Only a little bit. You don't even need to learn a lot. Small things can take a long way. Learning about like how HTML tables work, or just a little bit about what HTML is, can help you use Google Sheets to extract data from some websites, right? And we can talk about that later. I can answer questions about that. You guys can get in touch with me later on. But it will really help you understand and get the job done. For the Rugby World Cup, we did like some really cool stories, and like here are some of the graphics that we made, and you can like really see a pattern. That data was so rich that it had where kicks were being made from and where the ball was landing. This is gold for someone who really wants to go deep into an analysis. And right before the finals, we were writing like rich stories about the patterns of kicking by England and South Africa when they are on their own half of the field. Also something that really resonated with our audience. And again, just listing a little bit of the technologies that I used. Those are pretty basic. Like Google Chrome, everyone has it, right? Curl, it's something that comes installed by default on every Mac. Bash is just a different way of saying your terminal on your Mac, right? And JSON is just a data structure, right? But anyway, websites besides code, they can also be like a mess, a total mess. And that's, because they're created by humans, right? It's humans who are building websites. By default, they're fallible then. For example, in hypothetical scraping jobs, these four are like some really common problems that you'd run through. An HTML class that you're using on your script to select elements that contain this one type of information, they change from one day to another. Facebook and the New York Times are notorious for changing classes on their source HTML just so that they can avoid scraping, right? So no one's really investing a lot of time into trying to create a consistent framework for scraping Facebook or the New York Times with HTML selectors. They have to resort to way more expensive computational things. Not that it can't be done, but it's just harder, right? Data structure can be inconsistent. For example, the WHO during this pandemic is guilty of this sin, and the New Zealand Ministry of Health, oh my God, they changed the data structure 4 times in 48 hours. Drove me nuts that day, those 2 days, right? Human errors on input is also a problem. Remember when we were talking about copy and pasting the transcripts? Like, what if you pasted things on the wrong field of the spreadsheet, or the wrong document on the wrong Microsoft Word document, right? Human errors on data input are very, very common and a terrible problem, right? That's why using machines for those types of things are a way more reliable thing. And something that's a little bit different, it's not pretty much a problem, but an existential fact about websites, that they don't natively track what changed from day to another. And sometimes that's exactly the type of information that you're looking after, right? It doesn't matter if it's 10 or 20. What you want to know if it's 15% more, 15% less than yesterday, right? And so that's when scrapers come in handy too, right? You can use them to go daily into a website and just save whatever is there and compare those things for you programmatically, right? And so that brings us to my third takeaway of the night, and the last one. Oops, sorry. Let me try to go back here. Timestamp everything, because data can be meaningless if you don't know to what point in time it is referring to, right? So you can write scrapers that really basically create a change log of a website for you, right? That's mainly the strategy that's being used by every newsroom with coding chops out there. They're basically going to a website and scraping that and attaching to it a column on a spreadsheet, if we're talking spreadsheets, right? So this was scraped on day X, so this number refers to, you know, June the 3rd, right? And by doing that, by default, you are gonna create a time series, right? And a time series opens you, like it just opens a different set of doors for you in terms of your visualization storytelling, right? This GIF over here is of a to write because we've been tracking the COVID numbers for so long, and we knew day by day what the numbers were in New Zealand and all across the world, right? And it was probably one of the best decisions that you know our newsroom made as a group. And not only it yielded like this really good story that was probably one of the major hits of that month, it also allows me to, you know, quickly gather information on COVID for me or for other reporters. Just today, I was asked by one of our press gallery people who covered the parliament. I was asked about what was the last day when we had community transmission, and in 2 minutes, because I had this organized spreadsheet that I knew I could rely on. I tracked that number down in 2 minutes. That was April 30, I think. Yeah. So I mean, kudos for New Zealand on that, by the way. And you know, knowing all those things, and when an official source of information, like, you know, the Ministry of Health released the 10th death, right? You can start to scrutinize the decisions that are made by officials, right? So scraping is really helpful to journalism and to data journalism in that way. So remember, get away with like be done with the boring tasks, automate all those things. Just the basics of HTML, and you should be able to start scraping everything. And 3, just like, don't forget that like data without time, it can be really meaningless. It can be rendered useless, right? That's all I had. Here's my email. Feel free to email me. I'm also on Twitter. That's my handle there. And, you know, I'll be glad to help anyone, you know, get started with scraping. I love doing that, and I love sharing and then paying forward what people did for me in the past. So yeah, back to you, Tom.
Thanks very much.